Okay, so to summarize, the question is about asymmetrical problem solving, where, for example, you could simulate the Natanz bunker in high detail and then play a game online of here's all these different tools you can use. The game is called Bust the Bunker.
It's like an Ansari X Prize for,
For
busting
theoretically,
bunkers.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
as you get better and better, you get greater degrees of simulation accuracy because running a full simulation of a nuclear warhead detonating is an expensive thing to run, so you don't want to do the full version all that often. As well, like the Natanz bunker is not you could also try to design a better bunker and you'd still reach your same goals, which is saying that we have these tools that can bust any kind of bunker parameters. So a
Yeah.
generalized solution to bunker busting.
Yeah. Now, my question, I guess, a bit of a challenge on that one. Let's think about Spiderweb, where Ukraine was very fast to publish exactly how they did it, which is an odd thing. They basically open sourced how they did it. Now, conventional theory would say if you've got a successful operation, you don't open source how you did it. You just,
Right,
the
but they
results are the
can't they
results.
can't do that trick again because the nature of the operation, like it wasn't like a bushwhacking where they snuck up and hit them and ran off. It's like the evidence was fully available and remained at the strike site. So
It did, but
you
if they
know,
didn't open source it, what would happen is that information would only be available to Ukraine and Russia. But Ukraine decided to tell the world about how they did it, knowing that Russia would be able to work it out.
right?
So it's almost like there's uh, the advantage of an innovation um, uh, against an adversary in
I
this
guess the
case.
world is changing. That the advantage of an innovation is no longer the actual advantage. It's the advantage of the rate at which you can come up with the next innovation. That's the
Right,
advantage.
right, and it's also the secondary effects. So as soon as Ukraine published to the world how they did it, what we found was Russia started to have to inspect every ISO container on every lorry
Which is
around.
expensive, right? And it's a
Yeah,
hindrance to commerce and other types of operation.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I mean, I'm never going to look at a shipping container the same again. Does that one have drones in it? Maybe.
Exactly, exactly. And you see, the major powers thinking, oh shit, we're vulnerable, and now we need to spend resources and treasure and effort and
Right. And
uh,
so I guess, like, even those kinds of questions are stuckable, right? Like, the question is okay, you got a bunch of drones have somehow come up to your airfield. How do you stop them? I just, I know that fully open and transparent warfare, where the problem solving is generalized, doesn't seem like it'll work because if you end up with both sides having equal arms, then the only advantage is secrecy. Like, can you close the network and outpace the other network,
yeah,
right?
or it's attrition where everyone's working in the open and we just keep punching each other in the face
Yeah, but even
until
then,
one
that
falls.
seems dumb because you could simulate where that leads, and you're like, if it doesn't lead clearly to victory, your kind of best move is to stop, right? Like,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
which is kind of where, like, the problem of why people fight in the first place is because they think they can win.
yeah.
But if you could see clearly that you couldn't, then no one starts that fight, right? You're like, oh no, we'll just
Right,
leave that
right.
alone. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that this problem solving space is is in areas of asymmetrical warfare. There is a great opportunity for generalized problems to be put forth because the solving of it helps your team. Like you got to pick a side. Who do you want to win? And then, like in Russia's case, open sourcing or opening up their problems probably wouldn't do much because their problems are like, I've got a nuclear powered submarine and someone keeps trying to attack it with skidoos. Not many people really share that problem. Like, who's going to come up with a fix for that, right? Like,
Yeah, or they could incentivize, but yeah.
yeah, I guess. But it's also like, you're right. Yeah, you couldn't. They could use the same network to sponsor a solution and all that. But the the issue is that they're always in a different position, and it's the difference that makes them vulnerable, right? Like Ukraine kind of doesn't have anything. Like they got leveled in a way, but Russia has all this stuff that's from decades past, right?
Hmm.
Like technology of old, and it's valuable, and they keep using it. And for now, it gives them some advantage. But the point I'm trying to make is that even if both Ukraine and Russia used an invention network to come up with solutions and counter solutions and basically played simulated war games to get to a critical sort of okay, that's the thing we should make. We should make this thing. Russia's still
Yeah.
vulnerable because they got this stuff.
Well, that's exactly right. It's the sunk cost fallacy, isn't it? If you have spent, you know, 5 decades building up a large set of hammers, then you're going to look for nails. If you have nothing, then you're free to maneuver inside of the innovation space
Hmm.
and say, hey, we're not going to use nails. There's nothing to hammer.
That's
Well, now
right.
we're
That's
having a
right. And so
stockpile of hammers.
you start to get very cost effective, and then if Russia was reduced to the same level, they wouldn't be fighting anyway because you don't, these kinds of drone attacks, you don't start a war if all you've got is drones. Um, so I don't know. It just seems like not that I'm not that I'm promoting. It it just seems like I'm coming at this problem because the invention network is a system that we would do well to understand from all angles, and in warfare, as we're seeing it change, it becomes about innovation. Some of the innovation can be generalized, which makes it very applicable to using an invention network to solve. Some of it is specialized, like, okay, see this airbase over here, how are we going to get this shipping container within 50 meters of that Tupolev plane? Like, those are not open invention types of problems or solutions. And so I'm just trying to understand the generalization and who who would benefit and who would lose from the solving of certain problems, right? Like solving the bunker busting problem is an issue for everyone who has a bunker. But if you don't have a bunker, you're probably going to support the solving of that thing, right? And I, I know I'm being fuzzy, but it just seems like the
I'm,
West
s-
is
I'm
not
seeing what you're
a
saying.
great bunker building nation. Like the West doesn't have many famous bunkers.
Oh, the best bunker builders are the North Koreans. They've got great drilling technology.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's kind of what I'm getting at. There's these asymmetries everywhere, and they make it easier to do open. They make it easier to do open invention because, like, it's of no loss to you if you don't have any bunkers. The
Yeah,
asymmetry is in your favor, so you can be open about solving the problem.
that's right. That's right. And maybe closed about, solving how to defeat your own defenses, because that'd be silly. But the
Well,
other side could always do that.
yeah, but I'd argue that maybe
Oh,
that's a
actually,
good
no.
idea,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you're right. You're right. Because why wouldn't you want someone to solve a problem? You post up, here's our defenses, try and break them. Surely that's a good thing to know.
If it can be broken in theory, then what I think happens is you go chess move, chess move, chess move, and then you get to a point where you're like, oh, checkmate. Like you can't. It's like if I build my bunker this deep, if I build this bomb this big, if I do this, if I do that, at some point you reach a conclusion where you're like, that's the final state. Then the question becomes, can either of us afford all the moves that it took to get to that final state? Or,
And if you, um, let me pause here. So, there is a real tangible cost to building something like USS Nimitz.
yep,
And you've made your bet. So you place your hand down on the
yep,
table.
you made your
Here's
bet.
Nimitz.
Yep.
Um, Another country, without having put in that huge cost, but benefiting from innovation of a white sheet of paper, could easily come up with something like an unmanned mine that kind of sneaks up
Yeah, like
and
second
breaks its
second
back.
to play, second to play is at a great advantage.
Yeah, but it's at the great advantage because you can see what the other side has played first,
Yep.
and the side that's played first, all that is sunk cost. You can't do anything. You built the Nimitz, it is there. We put all this resource in, and suddenly it turns out that a bunch of hackers can, overheat the nuclear reactor or something like that. The Israelis are very good at this because, the cyber attacks on the centrifuges a few years ago
Mm.
is a good example of that. All that cost, in order to get the centrifuges there, was ruined by a bunch of guys saying, "You've got centrifuges. Oh, that's interesting. Um, that must have been quite expensive. We're going to mess with you through a completely different vector."
Yeah, I think my deeper question is how much are we going to face censorship requests from an open invention network that can be used to solve problems like fiber optic drone control latency, like um, autonomous sea vehicles, like 50,000 foot drones that can drop kinetic weapons. Like my question I'm really getting at here, and the reason why I bring up the Russia Ukraine example is isn't not not to it, that there's we need to understand what the censorship implications are. Like if people start to say, look, you can't solve these kinds of war problems, because in my mind the best way to fight a war is theoretically. And if both sides, it kind of becomes how hot does your invention network run? Like, who's got the most money and who's got the most brains? And you have these simulated fights where you're basically doing moves on a chessboard, and then you're like, well, we either run out of tokens or the the probabilities have amplified so much that we're not sure anymore. It would be better to not have the physical fight, but to have been defeated in simulation.
You're right, because in a completely open um, conceptual space, in a conflict, if uh, the innovation network of one side is agile enough to say, "Hey, here's a great idea," and the other side says, "We can't counter that,"
Yeah,
you're kind of stuck. That's
yeah,
checkmate.
yeah. And I think my deeper question is that while we are a global internet and there are regional conflicts, do we get to the point where people would require a closed network, like the Israeli Dreamcatcher would be tightly closed as they try to innovate for solving problems that would hurt them if the solution got out. And then there's also the issue of like, well, once you've solved something and then you deploy the solution, suddenly everyone else knows how the solution goes too. So, was there an advantage in keeping it closed at all? Perhaps if it was just open and implemented quickly and you could deploy it before a counter idea came out, then that's sufficient. Like the
It,
openness gives you rapidity.
it reminds me of Doctor Strangeglove, where the Doomsday device was perfected and in place, but the mistake they made was they didn't tell the other side about the Doomsday device. Um, and so, openness about your capabilities that can't be countered is a deterrent.
Right. Whilst you're deploying research to in the open solve it, but you've also got a private network of people that have proven their worth also working to counter it privately, or you might pay a lot of money to receive private counters, but it's almost like it you shouldn't try to close the counter should be open because if the other side has it, that's as good as like if it was open and everyone could see the counter, that's the exact same as if the enemy just sponsored the solution. But the
Yes.
enemy wouldn't tell you, and so you'd have this false belief, right? And so the only way to know that you're completely safe is to have an open network that can't solve your problem or your that can't break your solution, and you're like, that's sort of like how the NIST gave out AES encryption and public encryption because they're like, well, yeah,
Well, they gave it out because, and rightly, they believed that there was no countermeasure, and so if there's no countermeasure that they can see, then why not let everyone know not to even bother because they've got this
yeah. But the
encryption,
interesting thing about that move is it also gives away the encryption to the enemy as well.
which leads to stability, doesn't it? If everyone's got nukes, nobody
Everyone's
nukes
got
anyone.
everyone's got nukes. Everyone's got encryption. Yeah, like I don't know. Anyway, I think I might have. I think
No, there is a there's an interesting point here, which is your point earlier on about the chess moves and the checkmate in that environment is an innovation. Well, there's two things. If you've got two adversaries and one has an innovation loop that is just slightly faster than them, then the one with the faster innovation loop should be making everything open. The one that's slightly slower would be incentivized to keep it closed. The reason being, even if the one that's slightly faster comes up with a new, unique way of doing something, um, and the other one races to catch up and comes with a countermeasure, because they've got faster innovation loop, you're going to get a countermeasure faster. So there's something
there's some
about
funny things here about speed, like where the
yeah,
speed matters more than the thing, and yet if we trace back through history, it was the thing that mattered. Like when you got copper first and you held on to how you got copper and you went around and slayed everyone who didn't have copper, like, protecting the one innovation was what gave you the advantage. But now we're seeing that all around the world, you can't really hide in innovation because everyone's smart enough that when they see it happen, they can figure it out pretty
right,
quickly. And so
yeah,
the real weapon is the next innovation because the only true secrets in the world are those that have not been discovered, right? As soon
yeah,
as someone realizes it, then it's over. But you
yeah.
need the flame front on your cause to be further ahead than everyone else's, and that's what winning looks like. And so my deeper question, or my more politically charged question, is how much censorship are we going to see from, like, if we made this model of Natanz and was like, here's a simulator, see how you can break it. It doesn't feel like that would be a censorable thing.
It doesn't. And it seems that it wouldn't make sense to censor it because, um, uh, let's say, US has a very detailed map of Natanz, um, and Iran, who built it, has a very detailed map of Natanz. US releases that information and says, "Hey, here's a Ansari X Prize. Can anyone figure out how to kill this thing?" All it's doing is revealing the fact that it has a detailed map. That's it.
Yeah, but as we discussed, you could de de-specify that so that it only holds the features that you know are problematic and doesn't contain the specifics.
Yeah, you could, but I'm wondering whether even that would be a sensible thing to
Even
do.
that, right? And then what are you gonna do? Like, are you really gonna keep the design of your bunker secret? Like, that's not. It's hard to do. Like, when you got people in and out, someone's
Yeah.
gonna leak what that bunker looks like. And does it really matter? Like, I would imagine that the ability to, like, if you got a couple of corridors wrong, would that matter in the face of 100 kilotons? I'm not
Exactly,
entirely sure.
exactly. And then you're weighing it against the benefit of letting the world know that you know
Hmm.
what the other side knows because they built it.
Hmm.
And it's like, would you get benefit from that?
That's the
Well,
thing. I guess what we're really tapping on here is that there's a change in what secrecy or privacy means and what an advantage it is. Like, if you had simulation capabilities that were, pretty accurate, and you could model your ability to hit a particular target like a bunker, then, like, would you ever get you what you'd want to do is you'd want to publicize the design and then invite challenges to the design so that you eventually, when you committed to build, you were like, no one in the world knows how to bust this bunker. And here's the design, it's open, and here's the location, and we still can prove that no one knows how to bust it with all the simulated everything. So that's the one we're going to build.
there is something here, isn't there? So, tip our fingers. This is pretty nerdy, but it reminds me of the benefit the Borg had in that you could only fire off 3, 4 shots, and then they adapted. They adapted too fast for you to actually do any damage until you managed to get inside of it. Um, it's the if you were confident that you could counter to what you've got, why wouldn't you just let the other side know? Because then you could incentivize, say, right, okay, $10 million. Can anyone show me the blast wave that would actually do anything to this bunker?
Right. And then that's probably more valuable than having a design, keeping it secret, knowing that it will leak eventually somehow or could be probed through radar means or other kinds of imaging means, or, someone drops a couple of bombs and uses them as really big acoustic mapping devices, right? Because that's probably somewhere out there, right? You drop one bomb and it lands and it's got sensors, and then the second bomb just serves to, like, map the area. But
Yeah.
either way, like, what advantage is it to keep that secret, knowing that maybe the enemy figured out something about how to break it?
I think secrets are a habit. I don't think they're of much. practical use.
I think they used to have value when innovation was low and diffused,
Yeah,
because for two reasons. The second reason is that with innovation being high, it means that what was good last year might not be good this year because someone might have solved that problem. And so your secrets kind of, you didn't know about something at the time you spent the money, that's wasted money, you know. But um
it's
right,
yeah.
like it's just, it just feels like there's a thing coming
I
where
think
secrets aren't quite what they used to be, not even by half.
it seems to be manifest in the Ukraine-Russian war. The Ukraine have not been particularly secret
No, they're
about the
very
use of
open.
drones.
They're
Yeah,
very open.
but I think they're doing that because they've got a very um, decentralized production chain.
Do you think they're actually seeing? Do you think that without formally naming it or building a piece of software to manage it, they are actually receiving the benefits of a decentralized innovation network where they're finding that if they open source their solutions, then from the ether comes new modifications and next generation suggestions?
I suspect they did not realize um, what they had. I think it's emergent, just
Do you think
because.
that's what's happening there? Like
Yeah,
the top brass are realizing that if we give this away, we get back the next generation from the diaspora and all the supportive engineers
yeah,
around the world. Is that,
yeah,
yeah?
because they're on the drone production. Say, there's no way to keep secret when you've got 1,000 sites all producing drones. In garages or small shops. There's no way to keep that secret, and they've had to just build as many drones as possible, and so they're having to share what would previously have been a military secret. Say, now they've got to give 1,000 shops all the same information in order for them to go, oh, right, okay, so this problem that this piece of information had, we solved that 6 months ago. And then they share it again. And I think they've
So hang
lucked
on. So
into,
are you saying that already Ukraine runs a distributed network of manufacturing sites,
yeah, yeah,
and they don't? I'm going to guess they don't have a formal piece of software to manage that distributed manufacturing process.
not that I know of. No,
Well, I think we would have heard of it if we had. So they
probably,
could
yeah.
actually already be, without knowing it, a manually hand cranked version of the Uber war machine.
Yeah, because you've got a large number of incentivized individual shops that's decentralized, are all trying to innovate in the same area, and they're um, outpacing Russia, who's trying to keep everything secret.
Why does this site just get more and more interesting for Innovation Network? Like it just seems to, it's almost like they arrived at the Innovation Network out of necessity.
I think it just emerged because they didn't have anything else.
It was a necessity plus where we had reached a suitable technological level where they had the internet, they had robots, drones, AI, and all that.
Yeah, all the pieces were there,
The
but
pieces were
nobody
there.
nobody had put them
It
in
just
the
hadn't been
order.
formalized, right?
Yeah, or not even formalized because there's no formal drone, as far as I understand. There's no, everyone must manufacture to this spec or anything like that. It's just a whole bunch of guys putting stuff together,
Hmm.
hacking their own adrenals or whatever, um, and then just putting it out. And they're dispersing the information about, oh, okay, that didn't work. Oh, this worked really well. And it's like, oh, okay, right. We'll
Yeah,
use
yeah,
that.
yeah. So the coordination of that feedback, and then if we can get that feature in there of the auto detecting the problems and then automatically suggesting improvements, that's the key bit to introduce, I think.
I think so, and out of the necessity that now, if you think about it, why is Ukraine still standing? Everyone's, sitting back going, "Whoa, bloody hell!" He thought it was 3 days, and we're now in 3 years. Um, Now that is, several orders of magnitude more than what would even the most skilled analyst would have said Ukraine could have done. There is something that Ukraine is doing that is different now. I don't think that was designed in advance. I think that came from a highly educated populace who are
They
all
are very
incentivized,
smart. Yeah, very smart.
um, and you got these shops just popping up. You've got the central government giving money to these guys, going, yeah, 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 cool, right, keep going, keep going, keep going. Sharing innovations across everything. You've even got guys like the TFU, which are not even Ukrainian, going, yeah, yeah, okay, right, we're gonna try and push on the next thing, and the innovation cycle is the reason that Ukraine stands at the moment, arguably. Um,
It can't be from anything but. I mean, innovation loop.
yeah,
Um,
it's not because of any kind of tactics. It's not because of any kind of strategy. It's certainly not because of any stockpiles of military equipment. Because
no.
you're until they try to take down Ukraine, it was widely accepted that Russia was the second most powerful military in the world,
So
and they
once we have um, the first of the two reasons I was going to give why secrets don't matter so much is that the first one is we're starting to see the ability of an AI to maybe not solve any problem that you put to it, but certainly to rapidly assist you to get most of the way there. And
Mhm.
so secrets are really about, you know, what design choices did you make for a particular piece of machinery? Like, okay, it's a secret where I kept my potatoes. Okay, that's different. Like, the AI is not going to help you there. But if it's like a piece of technology, the then the AI is going to help you very rapidly figure out most of what you need to know about what the enemy's stuff does within reason, right? Like I imagine that solving how to build a Raptor engine so you can have a reusable rocket, maybe that's not feasible yet, but you know, it in you're also not up against that kind of technology every day, right? Like the Ukrainians aren't up against this super advanced technology because it just so happens that it's quite expensive. Like there's a ratio between how likely you are to encounter a $5 billion war machine and you know how dispersed you are or how like you don't hit those kinds of things very frequently. And so the ability to synthesize or backfill whatever you tried to black box, like AI can be a very good black box filler, and that's why secrets don't seem to hold the protection they did anymore.
yes, because what AI can enable is finding out um, what everyone else has missed.
Yes, but also telling you what everyone else knows, which is another reason
Yeah,
why things don't move forwards very fast either.
yeah. The most stunning part, well, one of the most stunning parts of the Ukraine for me as an ex-sailor, is how a country without a navy managed to defeat the Black Sea Fleet, which was formidable. It's no longer formidable. Now it's port bound.
Yeah.
Um, and the so the Black Sea Fleet, incredibly expensive to develop, highly regarded, um, even by the US, was defeated by a bunch of skidoos. That's because when you design a large, anti-ship missile platform, you're not thinking about the wee crack in its defenses. Um, and what Ukraine managed to do is, well, there's a crack in your defenses here. If you just send a swarm of skidoos uh, um, with explosives, even though they've got CIWS, even though they've got air cover, some of them are going to get through, and you only need one or two to get through. And these things are, a few $100,000 versus $60 million. And also the replacement speed on building more Skidoos versus building another missile carrier.
Yeah. And I don't know what it is, but it's almost like the AI robotics thing sort of stopped. Like you used to feel safe that an intelligent human operator, you relied on people not being suicidal, because ultimately you could have done the Skidoo thing back when Skidoos were invented if you just had people willing to die just to try and drop a bomb.
Yeah.
And so a lot of warfare relies on the population not being suicidal, which I think is why some of the tactics from the Middle East are a little off-putting to the West, because they're like, "What do you mean you don't care if you die?" But
Well, it's like a human, cruise missile.
yeah, and but now with AI controlling these systems, you kind of have the equivalent of a human where it really doesn't matter if they die or not, and so you get intelligent maneuvering, timing, endurance, all that in every little tiny thing. And it's sort of like, what do you really do against that? The only way you can fight that is to operate at the same scale. You need a fleet of Skidoos.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you're gonna, like, a battleship versus Skidoo, not gonna happen. It's also a cost exercise. You need to be able to make your fleet of Skidoos very cheaply.
Yeah.
And I think that
Yeah.
the cheapest way to make a good fleet of Skidoos is to have them doing profitable work when they're not at war, like being mini delivery boats or something, so that you're actually generating revenue out of these devices that operate as your military, because it seems to be numbers is what
They,
counts, like a swarm.
yeah. Yeah. You can reflash, 10,000 Amazon drones
Yeah, like
as fast as,
if you took the cost of supporting New Zealand's warships, New Zealand's navy, and you spent that on 10,000 robotic skidoos that also replaced a lot of the shipping requirements to go, like, you know, short haul, quick deliveries by sea, you could earn money from that, and you've saved all the military outlay, and you now have this weapon. That seems like I know that's maybe not the most practical example, but the point is that you can't expect to have an army just sit there doing nothing, because it's turning into a cost game. Wars has been about cost, but now the cost of a drone is so tiny that you really need your fleet to be cheap and big and in numbers and smart. That's kind of the
Yeah.
difference, I guess.
But also, there's one step above that is how did it ever come to pass that skidoos were a strategic weapon? And what is next? So, someone, for example, has an anti-drone fleet en masse in order to shoot all the skidoos. What do you do to defeat the anti-drone fleet? And there'll be something out there, and the person who, or the country that figures it out first, is the one that's always going to win.
Not always, though, because the first time they fire it, the innovation machine kicks in and a solution is found, I'm starting to think that the best posture for war is to be non committal, to invest in adaptation, manufacturing ability, transportation, rapid rearrangement. Like, you can't expect to know what's coming because only then can you build a wall. So the best way is to sort of be like water, where you haven't committed, but you've only got this power. You just have the adaptability thing down, and that's what you rely on. The first hit, you're going to take the first hit. That's part of the strategy. You'll be able to fight back, and you'll be able to fight back quicker and better. Like, that's kind of the difference, I think.
In retrospect, it seems obvious, isn't it? Because wars always, well, let's take the Second World War. It was there's two things really that decided that war. It was the rate of innovation between V2s and radar and faster engines and so on. And the second was economics, which is basically bringing power to the engine. It
Right, but
wasn't really about strategy on the battlefield.
um, yeah, but the only reason that like the United States provided a near limitless source of money in manufacturing,
Yeah.
but that advantage isn't there anymore, right? Everyone's sort of equalized, and so yeah, fuck. I don't know. It just feels like the rate of innovation is going to cause some like step changes in what it means to be militarily proactive, and it is going to be like not how many glamorous multi-billion-dollar submarines have you got. Is going to be like how many hundreds of thousands of drones can you afford to maintain and have at peak capacity, and
Or yeah, or it's
like, should
well,
robotaxis be like, like, is that the tank of the future? Like, it just drives people around day to day making money, and then when it's wartime, it just drops off its fare and then hurries off to the battlefield.
um, it could well be. It doesn't make sense to build anything large because you're making a bet on information that could overtake you.
It's almost like a large thing costs, like, in terms of value for impact, it almost costs like the cube of a smaller thing, like a Skidoo versus one of the big battleships that it sunk.
Yeah,
Like, the effectiveness is not big, is not good anymore.
big centralized, not good.
Yeah,
Small, decentralized, and rapid innovation,
yeah,
will always outwit big and slow.
right. And I think we can see that from like the dinosaurs.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, I think we thrashed that one to death.
Very
Censorship would
interesting.
censorship we'll just have to deal with as it comes. We did
Yeah.
build censorship resistance in there, so that's possible. Separate networks, if people want to close their networks, that's built in as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ukraine would appear to have an invention network in motion, just lacking a sort of a CRM or an
Yeah.
ERP, I guess, for a countrywide
Yeah,
manufacturing network.
they've kind of duct taped one together.
Yeah, what they need is like Ukrainian ERP, where the ERP
Mm.
itself is capable of withstanding bomb strikes.
Yeah,
I think we have
yeah,
that, and so that's an interesting route. Um, and lastly, I think whilst the bet may be too soon, I would say within the next 5 years, the value of secrets will be recognized as being lost. And certainly, as soon as AGI steps on the scene, secrets are over. And so, this transition
Mm-hmm.
from secrets are power, because I don't think whoever said knowledge is power, really, what they really meant, I think, was secret knowledge is power. But,
Yes.
um, we're going out there to take down information gradients, and information gradients are twofold. Nature itself, for some reason unbeknown to us, has put an information gradient in front of us which says that there is a maybe unlimited amount of knowledge, but that we start by not knowing any of it, and we may progress through toil, sweat, thievery, and invention, and whatever means to progress that knowledge, right? So that's the physical information
Mm-hmm.
gradient that exists before us.
Mm-hmm.
AI coming on the scene will be like an atomic bomb going off in terms of how great the veil can be peeled back, and it's very hard to predict what happens then. But the second type of gradient, the one that we most deter, is those put in place artificially by people who would keep secrets, not for the sake of their privacy or any other um, reasonable means, but to extract revenue out of others, to charge other people for a gradient that was artificial.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of secrets we need to kill. And I think that as the value of secrets is seen as being decreased, we'll see a shift in people's thinking along those lines, which will accelerate the openness. And our job is to lay out a platform to be ready to catch those new people who are jumping on the open bandwagon, to provide a platform that says this is how you can capitalize on it now, and it won't hurt you half as much as what you thought, because there's all these other benefits from it.
I agree. I think it's a big cognitive leap for most people who are used to secrets.
Yeah,
Um, but they'll die off.
yeah, that's the thing, right? That was the biggest sort of pushback in the early days we got from this innovation thing, is that no one wanted to be open, but
Mm.
now it's kind of not optional to be. It's. I think what I'm in a very long-winded way, and I'm sorry for that, trying to say is that there's a time coming when openness will be seen as the only way or the most efficient way. We absolutely have to be in place before that, but assuming that we are, I think we'll be in a very good position, because that seems to be where the wind is shifting, and it always pays to be ahead of where the mad rush comes, and that's kind of where we're placing our bet.
I agree, and I think it's a good bet because it does make sense that if you can out innovate the other person, then you're going to win, and you out innovate by getting as much information as possible. You just look at the how science conducts itself. You do research and you publish it. You tell the world, um, and there's value to you do that. Um, Kudos position, but also you get peer review back. Science has been doing this for the last 250 years.
Yeah, but it hasn't really caught on for day to day life,
No,
and
it hasn't, for some reason.
oftentimes science is kept secret where possible to gain monetary advantage, or military or physical advantage over the other side.
Generally not in pure science, but yes, when science is applied to something specific, then it
Yeah,
becomes secret, but then it slows down.
yeah. So I guess I hope that this change comes quickly. It sort of feels like it's quickening, and it also feels like the kind of change that will avalanche. Like it sort of, peaks, peaks, peak,
Yeah,
and then it just goes bang, and then suddenly everyone's like, oh, it's always
yes,
been the best way. Oh,
probably, yeah, it's probably going to be a phase change, isn't it?
hmm.
Phase changes, I think, driven by the expediency of war in Ukraine.
Yeah,
Although it's not
right. Very
probably not
much.
Yeah, I mean, war is a great way of innovating.
Yeah, it's sad that it has to be that way though. So maybe that's something that can be improved later. Anyway, may I switch topics?
Yes, of course.
The topic I want to talk about is vibe components.
Yeah, you mentioned that on the text.
So previously we were talking about how the issue with code is that it always needs to be so precise. And when I submit a patch, there is no other software code base on earth that patch applies to except the one that it's being made on. Even though the algorithms, the intent, a lot of the functions, there's a remarkable amount of similarity between that and a lot of other code in the world, and yet the patch can only apply to exactly that one thing. That causes all kinds of ills. It requires a specialist named a programmer to do some stuff for you. Someone needs to be skilled to fit it when it doesn't work. And in fact, it's so incredibly easy to make it not fit because you can do some parallel work in a separate branch, and now your patch that you thought was good is now not good. Um, so that seems awfully dumb, especially when I say it out loud. Um, on the other hand, we've got vibe coding taking off, but vibe coding seems to be hard to share components. Like there's no way to take parts of a vibe coded thing and share it along with the code. You can share prompt techniques, but they end up having to be applied directly to the project that you're on. And then if your conversation with the machine that's producing the vibe coded components, as that conversation drags on, you sort of like it becomes more and more unique. And actually, uniqueness is the enemy. Like, components are about extracting reusable bits, which are non unique. And
Yeah.
so, a vibe coding platform that could allow you to, first of all, extract out what you're doing into vibe components that can be applied to some other code base is useful. But second of all, as you're vibe coding, it would be better if I could vibe patch by having the bot find other vibe coded patches that include like prompt reasoning and some code. Having had some use of that or some testing and some refinement of that being done already, it would be more useful to vibe patch than it would be for me to try and vibe code, because even vibe coding is starting to take a lot of time, especially when you're trying to get it right and you're trying to shuffle it around a certain thing. But it should be that the bot can detect where you're struggling, or it can detect what you might want, and it should prefer to use a well tested vibe patch to solve the problem rather than it trying to do it offhand again
Mm-hmm.
every time, because even the bots do it slightly different every time too, right? And so you kind of want the standard.
Yeah, and it's a matter of fit at that point. If there's something that fits.
Yeah, and so one thing we know that the bots are very good at is fitting. And so they can take a patch that is not designed for this particular code base, but they can look at it, understand what it does, and then apply it to the code base. And they're very, very good at getting that bit right.
Mm. Right, and then it's down to discovery and judging whether the fit is good enough.
Right, right. And so, as it turns out, there's already a very good format available for Vibe components, and it's called a git commit. And if we just put in the commit message what the prompt is, and what some of the chosen strategies were, because I think that a good Vibe patch is going to consist of a starting code base minimized down to just the minimum required to show the point of the patch, a prompt, and then which would have been refined many times and ground over to reduce it down to be as sort of concise as possible. Some strategy information, which is to say that given that prompt, there are these 4 different ways that you could interpret that prompt, and then a selection of what that result was. So it's like sort of bundling up multi-shot in a condensed form, because you're saying this prompt could have given you these things, but go with this one, which makes it easier to regenerate rather than trying to get it single shot. Like,
I see. So there's a kind of discovery saying we know this is good and it does this.
yeah.
It may not be an exact fit, but it's good enough.
Mm.
So don't go and try and reinvent it.
Yeah. Yeah. And
That makes
because
sense. Yeah,
because
because
what I'm starting to see, right, is that a lot of npm packages, they they kind of work, but they always need a little bit of, it's always just not quite. And
mm,
at the same time, the bots are very good at writing from, I guess it's called first principles, or writing. They can do most of what the npm libraries do single shot by flopping, because they
mm,
already have the whole npm library in their training data. And so you almost don't need the library, because the bot can lay down the logic for you in raw code or pure code.
mm,
And so the problem or the point becomes like, well, packages change from being this conventional, ultra precise, super brittle, can't have a single byte wrong type of thing, to being like, maybe a package is more like a set of guidance for the bot on how to achieve a certain algorithmic outcome and what a suggested interface is, and the bot can kind of wishy-washy sort of shape the thing easier. Like, put it this way: like, if I got like a project with 100 dependencies, probably more practical. Say I got 20 dependencies of mine, and that's ignoring all the dependencies that those 20 dependencies have, which will probably be in the thousands if we tally them all up. If I could alter slightly what each one did
mm,
and shake it around a bit so that I could sort of, reconcile them down for my exact use, I could probably reduce much of my code, almost eliminate a lot of my code, and I could collapse down how many packages I needed. And particularly if I also took into account their dependencies, I could probably scrunch that down at a guess to like a quarter of the total amount of code. Because,
mm,
because the problem with code was its strength, right? It had to be precise, it had to be exact. It wouldn't even compile unless you had all the semicolons in the right place.
mm,
But that restricts it from being malleable to fit what you need. And so when you get in these npm libraries, the problem with any off the shelf thing is that it never quite does what you need. And then you always got to make extra shit. And so if you could just modify the library, and oftentimes that works out better for you.
You're not just going to end up with an explosion of branches of many libraries.
I would say you would reduce it because the fuzziness allows you to satisfy more use cases with less code. Because if your package specialized in being prompted to solve different kinds of tasks, and your speciality was that it was enough information that the bot could use it to make its own component on the fly, then you can hit a broad, very broad range of use cases with your just the essence of the package, like the seed of how to make the package is kind of, like you're enabling the bot to tweak the package one step before its publication, because the package can't know all the places it's going to be used in the future. But if it was fuzzy, it's kind of like answering questions that haven't been asked yet by using intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd say you could get a reduction, because anytime someone finds a use case that's similar but doesn't quite fit, then you'd work and grind and figure out how do you make the seed be able to be used in that use case too.
At what level do you put that seed? So, do you allow a package to fraction itself um, based on the local requirements of what it's being asked to do right now, so that it doesn't burden that package with another request, which it generally accepts but doesn't require the new
That's a
stuff?
good question, but I I start to suspect that if we allowed the bots to make that judgment, you would end up with the entire NPM library being boiled down, simmered down, and reduced to anywhere between 5 and 10% of what it is now. Because if the bot is in charge of determining whether something's in or out of scope, and it casts its eye across all the packages, you'd have like almost like a standard library, but it would be not a standard library in the classical sense. It would be an ever evolving, ever adapting one, because you could put in a new requirement and the bots plus some innovators would figure out how to make a new package. But if it was always reconciling down how to keep the packages tight and concise, you'd have a very tidy set of building blocks there, and it wouldn't be a large number of versions; it'd be less.
So you'd reduce the granular size of a package to the lowest that is useful.
Yeah, because oftentimes humans have to make that choice, and it's artistic where to put that cut, and so it's not always right.
Yeah, and being with a smaller granular size, it's much easier for the bot to understand it.
Yep. And in fact,
And
you could put this standard library into the bot's training so that it was fine tuned on the standard library and was
right,
very good at it.
right, you got something here, isn't it? So you've got your npm libraries. You fraction that to a lower granular size based on what people are asking, and then you use those as your Lego bricks for what you're asking right now.
Yeah.
And so discovery and construction is down to the AI, but because it's small bricks, then it really understands what each brick does.
Mm. It's almost like
Um,
it can order a custom package each time it has a new need.
yeah, yeah.
But
Hmm.
it's only slightly custom, but that slightly custom saves you a lot of time and effort and complexity because it um it really the essence of a package is it takes common problems and it finds a general solution for them. And the issue in npm libraries and all that is that humans had to do all that by hand. And so the solutions they found work well enough, but they've all got different customs and different ways of working, and some of them are surprising, and some have overstepped their bounds, some have understepped, and sometimes you're using the wrong package because it looked good and it was popular, but really there was this other one that was slightly different that you overlooked for whatever reason, or the keywords in the search weren't quite right, and then there's this other one that works great but looks abandoned because no one's used it or committed for 5 years. So what the fuck, And it's not flexible.
Hmm.
There's no intelligence in the package, and I have to take what the package was, right? Whereas this model, the package is built for you on demand by something that specializes in that little package. And I honestly, I question how many atomic packages there really are in the world.
Well, that is a great question because atomic packages really speaks to semantic deduplication.
Yeah, like if you reduced all that, plus you rolled it back one layer and allowed them to dynamically produce themselves within a certain range of capability, then how many packages are there really?
Hmm. It's compressing all the messiness.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is a really interesting question you're raising. So you fragment down to the atomic level and dedupe, and then make it discoverable
yeah,
and allow the prompt to distinguish which bricks it wants to build up in order to perform the function that it's being required to
yeah,
perform. That sounds like it's going to be a lot less.
yeah. And so obviously you'd test the ability of the how fuzzy you can be, like how far back you can roll. Um, but a good way to test this theory would be we could crawl through a couple of thousand npm packages and see if we couldn't work out a commonality between them. And this is without even testing how well we can regenerate the package or make the interface or tweak the algorithm on the fly, like just to purely deduplicate.
Right.
It might actually be feasible to crawl the whole npm library and extract out atomicity. Like this is all of the packages on npm reduced down in functionality and given a standard API over the top. This set of packages does everything that the npm library does, and that's it,
It
right?
feels like um, it could be a very lovely parsimonious way of building up the um, the capability that's been requested of it, because you're also going to have a lower or smaller search space by doing it this way.
You become much more effective as a product, I think, because like if people are like, I think our destiny is to become a vibe coding platform, but it's not a vibe coding platform in terms of conventional code. people only care about the output. They care less
Yeah.
and less about the code. We still need code because code is what naps are made of. Because conventional code is always going to be here as the interface to the human, the interface to the data set, and also an AI would naturally make little programs for itself to help it because a dumb CPU can do a lot more work in a lot more time than the AI can do using inference. So
Yeah.
it would simply make these tools. And so having having a small set of standard tools that we know work really well together would mean that the final product would be far more reliable, much more compact, and easier to understand for both human and AI if if you had this sort of well run, well twisted out, well compacted, distilled um, library. But it also allows you to start thinking about the program in big block form, simple big blocks. Because the issue with trying to do that with npm packages is the fucking API interface. It's always different and fiddly and doesn't quite work and all that. And that's why you can't really use these block diagrams that effectively because they're all bloody different. They're not blocks for starters. They got different ways of being called, but if you can allow the standard library to be thought of at a higher level by the human, and then that the bot will figure out how to fit it no matter how you arrange the blocks, which is sort of how a lot of business people think, and that's why there's this massive disconnect between the programmers and the business guys, because they're like, put that block there, right? And you're like,
Mm.
yeah, but the connection is expensive. And they're like, what? It's
Mm.
just a line. So a system that can do that and let us think about code and blocks where we don't have to get drowned in the minutiae or the details of exactly what the API calling interface is because the bots will figure that out. That sounds useful.
I think you're onto something here. I really do think you're onto something. This is a pattern of reducing to the atomic,
Reduction.
deduping, discovery, and then build up based on prompts.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, like, as you say, compression, if you can even strip back some of the actual code that you need to deliver in the library because you know that the bot can auto generate it on the fly.
Yeah, because then if you've got a whole bunch of building blocks, the only thing the AI really needs to consider is unique code that doesn't exist before and needs to be parsimonious and small and fit in with all the other blocks, the
Mm.
99% of the stuff that is just given.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, but actually, that is sort of a bit of a deviation from the key thing I was sort of trying to get at, which was when you're vibe coding a NAP or a user interface, you kind of want to be able to extract out bits of that into reusable prompt elements or prompty bits, I suppose.
Well, that's just making more new bricks, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, but you'd expect those to also be compacted down and deduplicated um, themselves, I guess. And even just within Codex, it would be super useful because, um, see, when you're sitting here and you're trying to merge stuff in, you can get these really annoying, a lot of very annoying merge conflicts,
Mm-hmm.
which happens very rapidly when you got these tools because that's just the rate of pull requests is obscene, right? But
Mm.
if you had this sort of sloppy way to extract out from each pull request, actually it's a prompt plus some sort of code plus some choices that were made, and now apply that to the code base. It really doesn't matter that there's a merge conflict, because it's the solution, it's the intent that you're after, it's the solution path, the chosen strategy. That's what matters. It allows you to keep the history of the prompts with the project, because that's what matters. If you're only doing vibe coding, the source code of the project is worth nothing anymore. The source code used to be the prompt because it was handwritten, and so you could learn a lot from reading the code, but it gets generated now. The new source code is these prompt elements, and we shouldn't be just sending in the direct prompt that someone wrote. It should be part of the cycle to refine that prompt, so it wasn't like slashing and guessing and rolling back and going forwards. The code process should involve trying to squash those prompts down into something elegant. To, like, when I write code, each commit represents the final state that I chose to express after backtracking and backpedaling and typing this out and getting this wrong and doing a lot of trial and error, right? But in vibe coding right now, it's just only forwards, right? There's no like reflection, refinement, compression. I'm not squashing it down into what would have been the most elegant prompt, given the hindsight of having made a lot of non-elegant prompts.
Can you give me 2 seconds?
Sure.
I've just got a call.
Sure.
And I want to find out why. Because I should not have a call. Second. I can responsibly ignore that. I might get a second call if it's urgent.
Okay.
Yeah. I think this pattern is a good one.
It just feels like it can apply to a lot of other things, like law, medicine, all those kinds of things, because you start to get this ability to squash down the prompt and then get the prompt checked. Like if it's law and you're like, well, I made this prompt, I got this response. A real lawyer should be able to verify what was the right output and help you condense down the prompt so that you can start to, what's the word for it? Like, you can just have better components rather than expecting the machine to fucking know it all from scratch.
It's also treating the prompt itself as part of the components of which
that's what I'm getting at. Thank you. That's what I'm getting at. Like, the prompt is part of the component, just like the prompt is now the source code, and the prompt should be refined, cleaned up, trialed, and errored a bit before you do the final commit, because be a tidy person. Don't be an animal.
Exactly.
And there should be unit tests. There should be checking of the prompt. So you got to a stage you're like, cool, compile it. And compile in this new world means look at all the prompts, reduce them down, clean them up, make them explicit, test regenerating from just this new theoretical prompt, tweak it until it regenerates correctly, say what the rules are that this prompt adapts for the business rules of the app. And so as I continue my vibe coding, I'm also building up rules about the system that I've given in the prompt, so that each time I say something, the machine doesn't just fucking guess again. I don't have to maintain a separate rules file. It's just all being done for me. But the source code itself includes the prompt as part of its basic, like that's what a commit is. It's the prompt plus the changes in the strategy, and I can reuse each commit almost as a smart patch, an adaptive patch.
Hmm. Because um, prompts, you can derive the intent of a piece of source code, but you have to kind of guess, and occasionally you go, "Why the hell did you do that?"
Mm, mm,
But the prompt surfaces the intent much more clearly.
mm. Which, interestingly, that you mentioned that, because one of the great long-standing complaints is people not documenting their software.
Yeah,
But
but
if you got the
who wants to do
prompt,
that? Yeah,
you got the intent of the creator, which is even better than the docs. You got
yeah,
what he meant, right?
right.
So
And
actually, you've got more back for keeping the prompt, right? Because you got how to build the software again generatively. Then you've also got what was the guy building it trying to do, and you're forcing him to like clean up what he meant at each step. So he like tries what he meant, tries what he meant, tries what he meant, cleans it up, accepts that that is what he meant, nice and clearly and concisely. Bang. That's better than docs.
it's much better. And also has the benefit of forcing you to be clear about what you actually meant.
Well, yes and no. It has the benefit of surfacing clearly what you meant. It may not force you to because the bots should be able to help you with that. So long as you gestured enough in the right direction, it would sort of smooth your wobbling hand, so to speak.
Sure. But if you add in unit tests to that and you're getting some variation because of ambiguity in your prompt, then this is not forcing, but it
Yeah,
is influencing you to be
influencing
more.
you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Highlighting to you where you were unclear, which is often very hard to do when you were struggling to see the solution anyway at all. And then the bot comes back and says, yeah, it could also mean these three things. And you're like, well, now that you mention it, I'll pick option number two, please. And off you
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
Now, that that also means that the commits each time become much more meaningful because right now, uh, I mean, I feel bad for saying it, but I stopped writing commit messages. I stopped writing commit messages maybe a couple of days after starting to use Codex because my commits felt very worthless. And you can tell that they were done by a human because of their inferiority. But my point is that a commit at the moment often doesn't mean that much either. Like if I look at a commit, I'm like, what does that mean? And if I roll back in history, I see only diffs, big diffs, lots of diffs. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, sort of. It's too much
Hmm.
information. But if the commit was the prompt with the intent and it was sort of ratified and reconciled each time, going back in history is very meaningful to me now because I can roll back in the intent. And I can even do queries against the history of the intent, like saying, hey, show me where he decided to make the box blue instead of green. And then it's like, ding, 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 ding. And now you've got everything that they were thinking and trying to do at that time. I think this is the future of coding. Like, I know that's a
There's
bold claim, but
something there as well because you can build a story thread on any um, collection of the commits,
mm,
which also has an intent, but that
mm.
intent can be derived by, oh, you want blue buttons, you want it to do this, let me
Right.
do
And
that
then
for
I
you.
guess you could use that to map back to your work. What were you trying to do? What was the roadmap? sort of what were you shooting for? What
Right.
was the roadmap in retrospect? Like you can extract the intent and
Where did you wander off the path? Yeah.
yeah, and so if you can retrospectively fill in a roadmap, you can then forecast the rest of where it's going and benchmark it because you're like, well, you were trying to do this thing for this amount of time, and so that's what that cost, you know. And yeah, I just see nothing but benefits down this path. It just feels like that's the future of code. It's not.
It does when code is so malleable that it's automatically generated. Where do you put your flag in the ground of,
Mm,
you know,
it's the
this is
prompts.
it is the prompts.
And there's nothing even close to being a prompt library or a prompt package registry where you can provide prompt with some code with some background information so that you can reuse a component or produce a component where it comes with prompt and code.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Agreed. I think it's just got legs.
Mm. The bigger question is, does code still have legs in the future? And I'm betting that it does because I don't know what to do personally if it doesn't, which
Well,
is not a great reason to place a bet, right? You're like, I'm placing this bet because I'm dead if it's wrong.
yeah, but we're talking about high level code. So the relationship between prompt and code seems to be very similar to code and assembler.
That's right, it's another layer, right? Except this one contains fuzziness, whereas um, high level language and assembly was a direct, unambiguous mapping,
Yes.
right? It was a mechanical change, but this is an intelligence change, a fuzzy change.
Yeah, but a high-level code to assembly did lose information. So harking back to when I was doing computer games, you could do things like unrolling the loop in order to improve performance, and you're kind of leaving it down to the assembler to deal with that with you. Yeah, so it's like, okay, so I've got 3 lines of code. You could do it naively, or you could unroll the loop, uh, miss all those jumps, and you'd get much
Mm.
faster. So there is some you're kind of trusting in the assembler to take your code and do the best that you think should do. But well, when was the last time you looked at assembly? I mean, it's like years ago. Um,
Years ago, I can remember exactly what year was the last year I looked at assembly. It was 1999.
yeah, well, that's later than that's later than me. Um, I should probably go back to '95.
Yeah.
Um, but the you kind of just assume it's going to happen, and so there is some kind of trust in the flop of the assembler. Um,
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a good point. I feel a little bit woozy that we're talking about making code that's fuzzy, but to be fair, vibe coding is a fuzzy thing, and the end result is all anyone cares about. So,
well, the good thing, the reason assemblers are useful is you can improve the assembler and get more efficient code out of it without having to change any of your high level source.
oh, right. Well, that's another way to look at it. So the prompts stay the same, but the model gets super smart, or there's been some new breakthrough in algorithms or something. You can
Yeah,
upgrade the package or upgrade some of those inner workings, and now you've got a better result. The
yeah,
prompt didn't change. Because I guess
and
the human intent, the intent of the prompt is forever, right? Like you always meant to do that. And it was
yeah,
always a valid thing to do because you had some end goal.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
even more,
exactly.
I guess it's even more future proofed. And it's also, in a weird way, kind of language agnostic.
Yes, very much so.
Like you could
Very much so.
recreate someone's intent in another language, maybe.
And you could even project onto the next level up where your original intent was scrutinized, saying, well, you asked that, but here's a better way.
Hmm.
Especially
So
when
like
you're combining blocks. If you're combining blocks, say traveling salesman problem, you got all these blocks together, your intent at each is known. The very high level intent can be implied, saying, oh, the AI looks at it
Oh,
saying,
so all you're really saying is that, like, the purpose of packages is to encapsulate a whole lot of thinking and work and intention in a way that makes it simple to use one level higher.
yeah,
And componentizing prompting is doing the exact same thing because that's the key to technology, really, is like wrapping it up and consuming it higher up because you've
yeah,
simplified it. You've made
yeah,
it a box.
exactly. And it's a well kent box. You know what
Yeah,
that box
right,
does.
right. It's a trusted
Um,
thing. And then, so doing that same thing with prompts is inevitable because the prompt is clearly the thing that is surfacing right now, but the prompt has actually been always the thing because it was what the human wanted to do in everyday words.
yes, yeah.
And that's always been there. It's just we've never written it down
Well, it's also
before.
it's being encapsulated inside of the head of the software engineer.
Yeah, yeah. And so now we can audit that finally because we can de-encapsulate it and we
Yeah,
can standardize it.
and surface it and not require the software
Right,
engineer to write a
right,
whole bunch of
right.
docs.
Oh, goodness. And then that gives us even better insight in our searching for has someone done this before? Because we're like, hey, look, we see your intent and we found these things.
Yeah, yeah.
You would never have been able to do that in code alone. Never,
It
never, ever. You
just
couldn't.
seems like the next obvious step from what we've got at the moment in the stack we've got at the moment. It just seems like there's now the intent layer.
Right. So, how do we fit that into the NAP format? Hmm. That's a curly one. Maybe a question for another day.
That's that.
Um,
Yeah, that's gnarly. That's gnarly. I'll think about that. Well, the obvious one would be a compilation down of a thread into an intent that reliably produces code that does what that intent is meant to do. So repeatability seems to be a thing.
um, does repeatability matter if you've got a reliable fitting agent?
Oh, okay.
It doesn't, I think. Like, what's the point? I mean, so long as you can reliably get to the same end result.
Repeatability of the intent is important, but how you do it becomes throwaway. It's like
Yeah,
you could do it because this is the kind of the art around software engineering, isn't it? There's many ways you could do the same thing, but that thing, if surfaced, is always what you're trying to do. So the repeatability really comes in, do you get the outcome that the intent implied? Not do you get exactly the same source or
nah.
same runtime or all that is throwaway.
So I think, yeah, hmm, no, those are interesting things, but it does sound like that's the path we're on, right? Because it
Mm.
can't be this shit. This cannot be the future. I mean,
No, this is
reading
a
fucking
horrible, you know. a large ship hits iceberg kind of merger going on at the moment.
Yeah, right.
Um,
And it's like, okay, sure, like Codex is a beautiful thing above what we have right now, but you can't leave us here. Like we can't be this can't be my life just looking at diffs, right? And that's why I'm like there's something more and this prompt this like vibe components and stuff like that, like that feels more like the future than this.
oh yeah, because looking at diffs is a manual task. So when you're looking at diffs, you're probably trying to figure out um, better or worse. Does this improve
Yeah.
the thing towards my intent? But the
Yeah.
intent stays.
Yeah.
Otherwise, madness that way lies.
Yeah. And now I'm sure that OpenAI are looking at all this and being like, yeah, we know that's a problem and we're working on it. And I'm sure that they will provide a fix for it. But
Well, the one thing I think we can be certain of is AI is always going to be driven by prompts.
yep.
I can't see another way of doing it other than perhaps AGI just releasing it and it's doing its own prompts, but it's still doing prompts, just not
And
generating
then,
the
well, the
prompts.
way, a more humble way to say is that the way that humans will interact with AI is always going to be prompts. Like we
Yeah,
don't
there's
have
nothing.
anything. Like
There's
that's the
not.
way that we interact with each other,
Yeah,
right? Like I
precisely.
prompt you, you prompt me, and
Yeah,
then like stuff happens in the background, and
and
then
until we get brain to brain interfaces, which
yeah, yeah,
is getting silly, that's the end of the road for interaction.
mm,
Because
mm.
otherwise, you get into real scary sci-fi stuff, which I don't think is
Yeah. I
probably
mean that's well
never going
outside
to
of
happen.
our mandate to
Yeah.
care about. I think.
Well, we'll be dead by the time it's even a problem, if it is going to
Well,
be
I
a
hope
problem.
so. Anyway, so because the other issue that I want to talk to you about is like OpenAI will start to unify their models, right? They've got all these different things in different areas, and they'll start bringing it together, right? And it'll get more and more unified. And so, uh, any venture that's founded upon or predicated on simply smoothing the clunkiness of the interaction between different models is kind of doomed to fail,
Yeah.
right? So we need to not be that, but I'm just not sure how we're not that. And then even if
Um,
like if we manage to do vibe components and they become popular and they get swallowed and used elsewhere, great. How are we still relevant, I guess? Why are we not just easing easing the interactions?
um, I keep on going back to the value of um, innovation and attribution, because I don't think that is smoothing out.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, sorry. Actually was quite a dumb question. Sorry. Um right. So we basically we gotta not try to be. It's like we've got to be cool enough and leading enough to be able to insert into the system or to be able to insert into the environment. Because if we're stale and out of date, ambient attribution is never going to get picked up anyway. So we've got to like
Yeah.
almost like we've got to put it in a delivery pill, stuff it into the ecosystem, and kind of be cool enough for just enough that other people pick up the ambient attribution concept and then push the platform forwards. So like we can add innovations like vibe components and whatever, but in keeping with our prior discussion about innovation rates, like that'll be stale very quickly. And
Yeah,
then it's the next thing that matters, right? So
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
guess.
And remembering that OpenAI and the other providers are also could be inserted and subsumed into the innovation network because they are providers of that. But what's being built in that tier two thing requires them that that means OpenAI is contributing,
Right.
and the danger would be to get sucked into spending time and resources to do something that the innovation network could do.
Right. Yeah, that's the other time hole, right? Don't We should never do anything that the innovation network could do, and we should certainly not do anything that delays the most basic of innovation network to appear,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so vibe components, we don't need that now to get the innovation network going, so I'll park that.
yeah. It's fascinating, and I think you're right uh, in surfacing that there is a compilation step from prompt to code, then code to assembly. Um, then you could even go down to silicon, um, but we don't need to provide that.
Mm,
What we need to provide is the environment where that simply surfaces, and maybe it does it outside the innovation network, and it's just sucked into the innovation network, like model improvements, or maybe there are holes and gaps um, that the innovation network actually does provide, but the innovation network stands. So,
right, because it's the network that's the thing. Okay, well, have we got enough in this system to be the basics of the innovation network if we fill in all these boxes?
yeah, yeah, and again, really, it's just a matter of building context in order to apply a model and then save the thread for you know just as any other asset inside of a repo so that you can then do the same, pull two or three threads and saying this is what I'm trying to do. um, Maybe compile down the threads to an intent, be quite close to what you're talking about with vibe. um,
All right,
but
because you could be chatting here and your code's popping up here, and then a background process compiles that down.
yeah, yeah,
Right, so we can attach that directly. Oh, good. Yeah, no, this is what I was looking for. So yeah, we would be able to insert vibe components into this interface even by merely adding another kind of nap that triggers each
yeah,
time there's a new message in the thread, it triggers and it's constantly trying to compile down. It gives you feedback and says, look, you know, I can compact this down like this, or you're actually talking about a new component now. So let me break up your vibe coding thread into different sections where I've compacted each one down whilst retaining the original, but I've compacted it down to plain, committable, explainable vibe components. And so
yeah,
you can now look at this. You can take your vibe coding session and you can treat it like blocks with the components that even you worked on in just this session, never mind any external components, and you can pull out, put in, rearrange, focus in on, and just you can work on the project in a concentrated form rather than like you're always working on the whole damn thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's pretty useful.
yeah.
That's very
And
useful, in fact.
in terms of tooling, I mean, there's that background compilation step, but we're still talking about the same thing next time you come to it, which is I'm talking about this or I'm working on this at the moment. Um, and, you generate something, save that something, but along with saving the output, you're saving the intent based on the thread, which is based on the context, which that context points to a number of other similar repos, each of which has got an intent and the output, and so you can trace it.
Hmm. So from this interface, we think that we can build the basics of an innovation network
I think,
because,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah. Sorry, I was just going to agree.
so because we've got contexts where we all can find each other and do the same thing that you could do in WhatsApp or Signal, which is where all the innovation networks seem to be happening now anyway. Which,
Yeah,
as an interesting side note, it's funny how for all the fancy apps we have in the world, it all seems to have sort of distilled down to fucking
text
right. Like
messages.
it just came down to a chat app, which we had originally with SMS, but now
Yeah.
we've got like yeah, like all these other things just got eaten, and then like if I think about what the skateboard represents, in a way, it's sort of like WeChat because WeChat was founded upon contacts, chats, and then they started adding apps inside of the chat app.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, okay, so, uh, my apologies, I got waylaid. So we think this can found the innovation network because you can have contacts where we find each other. We got automation, which is in terms of agents and stuff. We can talk to each other. We can talk to AIs. We can communicate context between each other using transclusions, where that
Hmm.
context communication can be real time inside of a chat with each other. It can be baked and locked and snapshotted so it can be referred to in history at any time. It's very data efficient, yada, yada, yada. We have events, which are automation triggers, so that we can attach automation to any event that occurs within the platform.
Hmm.
We have data, where the unit of data is the repository, and the repository represents a Git commit history of a particular concern or domain. And so we can share these repos, separate them out to be projects. We can do, whatever we want, really, that we could do with Git, which is kind of how all software innovation at least ends up being, in that it's just a Git repo or something.
Hmm.
Branches, which is just managing the data effectively. Files, which again is just navigating the data. Naps, which is the execution layer attached to a repo,
Hmm.
whereby you can also click this button to view the visual, the UI of that nap by way of a
Hmm.
frame. Processes, which allows you to see what naps are running in the current repo so that you can manage large amounts of computation. Are you still there? I think I've lost you. Welcome back.
Sorry about that.
It's
I
all right.
got kicked out. I don't know why.
Huh, that's rude. Um, the activity dashboard to just, yeah, same
Yep.
triggers, automation, attachment, settings, which is pretty blasé. It's just managing permissions and stuff like that around the data, and innovations, which is where the problems either auto-reported or manually actively reported, passively reported, or actively reported. That's where the innovations for that particular repo go. This is the key to the innovation network because these innovations are intended to be cross repo
Yeah.
and universal, or as far reaching as you like them to be, so that you can share them within just your networks of people or globally, and you can receive solutions and attach escrow and other such things, and that will all happen there.
Yep.
And then that's all we got.
I think
That's
that's
all it
enough.
is.
I think that is the right number of things to have for an innovation network.
I know it feels like a lot, but it also feels like not enough. Like not enough in terms of like it should have been more or
Why?
something.
I can't think of anything to
I
add.
don't
I
know.
mean,
Just
bells and whistles, like explorers and viewers and
yeah, I know. It
subscriptions.
just. I guess it's more just disbelief that something that we believe can unfurl into such a complex thing can be achieved with so few components.
That's a good place to be, isn't it? If there's too many components, then it's brittle.
Yep. And if there's too few components, it might be wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Oh well. Look, I guess it's enough to. I can make all these things, and I can get us launched with these things. So we think these are enough. I mean, I don't know why to disagree with you.
Oh, and disbelief.
Yeah, which
Well, I
isn't.
guess.
It's not a reason. That's
Yeah.
a terrible
We'll
reason.
find out pretty quickly
How?
by using it.
But we can imagine enough that it's like. Yeah, sorry. I guess I'm just wasting your time. Like it. It very likely might be enough, but we will. It is beyond the reach of both of our intellects to see whether it will or will not for sure.
Yeah.
And so here is the point where we have to test reality.
That's exactly it.
And then if you want to take a nap with a frame and produce it as a standalone app without this backstage full featured view, then that's very easy to support as well. You just got to log in with Privy and then just use the nap as though it was the primary nap.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's good. It continues to be good.
Yeah, sorry I haven't done that much more. Going into hospital was a bit of a
Yeah,
curveball.
that
Um,
usually, cramps the ability to do shit.